Most companies think they have an AI infrastructure problem. What they actually have is an AI operations problem. GPUs get racked, clusters get provisioned, and then everything stalls because nobody solved how to deploy, orchestrate, monitor, and recover those environments at a scale. IREN just made a bold bet that the answer is software. They have agreed to acquire Mirantis, the open infrastructure company behind Cordant AI and Moz, in a $625 million all-stock deal. And today we have with us, once again, Dominic Wilde, SVP and General Manager of the core business at Mirantis, to dig into what this combination really means for platform engineers and enterprise AI. Dominic, if you look at Mirantis, you folks have built your reputation on open infrastructure. It's OpenStack, Kubernetes, no vendor lock-in whatsoever. Now you are being acquired by IREN, which is very much an AI cloud provider with its own stack. How does Mirantis stay neutral, and what happens to customers who want to run Cordant or Moz outside of IREN's cloud?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And obviously one I think, that will come up. The reality here is that, actually the companies have, a shared vision on this. Obviously we have a long track record of building on open source, delivering, solutions that, serve customers, give them, both an on-ramp and an off-ramp if they should require it. And if you look at history, every time there's a sort of a major technology wave that happens, generally, platforms split into proprietary and, open. And we've seen this many times, right? We've seen this in the mobile space with Android. We've seen this in compute with Linux. And we've seen this in cloud with Kubernetes, where, the open standard, tends to win. And now as AI infrastructure is, really starting to emerge as the next big technology wave, now is the time for an open standard to emerge. And obviously we had already built Cordant, which is our AI infrastructure platform. We'd already built that as an open source first platform, and I think that IREN and ourselves were aligned to this idea that it is good for the industry overall to deliver an open standard platform. It kind of floats all boats. The more that you sort of remove friction and accelerate things with open standards, the more people will consume. So it's really good for everybody, and this deal helps us to accelerate the cause.
Mirantis is expected to operate as a standalone subsidiary. What does that independence really look like in practice, and how does it protect the existing customer base?
We will be an independent subsidiary. So we will have our own sort of governance model, our own governance board, which will be obviously, people from both Mirantis and IREN, but also independent board members as well. So there will be an independent governance, and I think that can give confidence to other customers in the industry, including, our existing customers, that, we will continue to deliver on our roadmaps, our promises, all of the good things that we've been doing, we will continue to do. And, but, we will also, build forward and accelerate forward for the industry to, remove friction and accelerate the adoption of AI infrastructure.
You have been deep in Kubernetes native orchestration for AI workloads for a while now. Can you talk about where does upstream Kubernetes still falls short, specifically when we talk about GPU scheduling, multi-tenancy, and lifecycle management, and what is Mirantis actually solving there today?
I mean, I wouldn't say that, I would never characterize it that Kubernetes is kind of failing. I mean, this industry is moving fast. I think that, in many ways, Kubernetes has kind of already won the cloud sort of, battle, as it were, and is now evolving to, to match the needs of the AI cloud and AI services. So, I think like any good technology and, and community-driven technology, the evolution path is part of the attraction. It is the, we're not ripping this up and starting again. We're evolving, the technology forward, and that is a community effort, and that is, all the good reasons why, we've been, behind this as a foundation of our business. I think specifically around, sort of technology challenges, I think certainly sort of, utilization, virtualization of GPUs, particularly in respect of hard multi-tenancy requirements that get driven. There's sovereign kind of issues that I think are emerging, and those in some cases are geopolitically driven. In other cases, there is just the need for segregation, hard segregation of data for privacy reasons, etc. And so, those are a lot of challenges that with GPU architectures and everything have to be, solved and optimized. And I think that, I think most of, what we're doing is optimizations. I think that, the industry as a whole has, solved problems like these before, and now it's kind of taking prior art and it's saying, hey, how do we, move forward and optimize in the right way, in terms of, the business needs that are out there in the world. So, there's a multitude of things. Inference is a whole new world. This is the big coming wave and the big coming sort of revolution. And so there's a lot of challenges, to do with, how do you deliver and how do you broker, inference sessions and things. So some of these things are going to be using technology, as we always do, to solve, business problems. And some of them are going to be, optimizing, technology for, better performance or, other optimizations.
Exactly. And Mirantis brings the orchestration brain, whereas IREN brings the raw GPU horsepower. How tightly will these two layers get integrated? And will operators still have the freedom to swap in their own schedulers, runtimes, or networking components?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, if you, outside of, the parameters of this deal, I mean, if you just look at, the technology stack, I mean, there is, the industry needs a full suite and a full stack of, of capability, and all of the layers of that stack are related to each other and dependent on each other. One of the tenets that we, started with from the very beginning with Cordant and, and the fact that Cordant is, open source, was the idea of composability. This idea of, one of the things I like to say, or we like to say, is that, look, we will come with an opinion, opinionated stacks are good. It gets people started, reference architectures, for instance, are good. But you shouldn't have an agenda. It shouldn't force people to stay and be, tightly coupled into, an opinionated approach. So if somebody has, different elements that they want to swap out, or they want to use alternative, things, the option is there. And we've designed and architected, that from the ground up. As far as, again, the approach, moving forward with the broader industry, we are building for the broader industry. And we are, driving Cordant with the intention that, there is an opportunity to deliver an open standard for the industry. And, we believe that, the Cordant AI is, has, tremendous opportunity and potential to be that standard. And now with, the backing of IREN, and as you rightly said, they are bringing together the infrastructure at scale, and, proven delivery capability. And, we're adding to that software operational expertise, and we, will strengthen, the ability for customers to deploy this infrastructure. And so together, we can really drive AI infrastructure online a lot faster. But, we'll continue to support our existing customers as we do that. We'll continue to advance, Cordon as the AI platform of choice, or the AI open standard, really.
Now, if you look at platform engineers, provisioning infrastructure is the easy part. Keeping it running reliably at AI scale is where teams sweat and lose sleep. What should platform engineers realistically expect to improve in observability, failure recovery, and upgrade management as a direct result of this acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's about having the backing to accelerate, and be able to move forward faster. But we certainly see that the day two operations are a key here, and that things like observability, FinOps, etc., being able to bill correctly, the observability, the recovery factors, all of those usual day two things, and things that in the Kubernetes community we kind of take for granted. All of those have to be brought in and optimized for AI infrastructure, whether that's distributed inference, or inference jobs at the edge, large training models, all of the different kinds of workloads. We have to optimize for all of those, and this is the journey we're on. So our intent and what we want to do is move a lot faster. Remove any friction, remove any uncertainty for the industry, and so that's the path we're on.
You folks are also founding ISV partner in the Nvidia AI Cloud Ready initiative. How does IREN's scale change what Mirantis can offer within that ecosystem?
Well, when Nvidia announced the Nvidia AI Cloud Ready initiative, they did that because as Nvidia do, they are very sort of ecosystem driven. They want to advance the industry as a whole. What they recognized was that they had a lot of the pieces of technology that they had built themselves, and they sort of started to open source a lot of stuff. The bare metal NCX controller, that was a big announcement at GTC, and we've integrated that into Cordon AI. And so they have a bunch of foundational pieces that becoming open source. We have, as an ISV vendor, we have the expertise to take those pieces, bring them into a usable format, align to that, the expertise, and the system level, capabilities. And then, the cloud sort of, service companies, the companies like IREN, then come in and deliver vertically integrated, cloud platforms, and add their expertise and their delivery capability and their, scale and stuff. So there's always been this kind of like this natural sort of affinity and combination of these three constituents, and I think what Nvidia did was kind of formalize that into an initiative and a program, and we were very proud to be one of the inaugural ISV partners in that program, one of only three, I should note. And this is the result is the proof point here is that that this model works. You bring these three pieces together, and you can drive faster, and you can solve a lot of problems.
What does it mean for Mirantis's involvement with, of course, open source, and also you folks are pushing a lot on new cloud. Of course, you mentioned sovereignty, but that is a big topic these days in Europe as well. What does that mean for a lot of strategies that Mirantis had in place?
Nothing changes. It's a very simple answer. Nothing changes. We've reached out to, our customer base and let them know that, everything that they have relied on Mirantis for, it remains in place. All of the promises, the roadmap, the services, the contracts they have, the staff that they work with on the day-to-day basis, all remains in place and goes forward. No change at all. As is also true of our commitment to the open source community. And in fact, our CTO, Sean O'Mara, has written a blog on our website specifically to the open source community to explain our position here. And I encourage people to, go read that. But yeah, we are absolutely committed to our existing customer base, our emerging customer base. We're, committed to the community. Nothing changes. And, as I said, we will be, governed as an independent entity and, we will move the industry forward. We will continue to make those contributions in the community.
And ironically, if I can draw a parallel between Red Hat and IBM and IREN and Mirantis, what kind of chemistry is going to be there between IREN and Mirantis? Is it going to be same thing as similar as IBM versus Red Hat, where they are, yes, IBM owns Red Hat, but they treat each other like customers and partners, and Mirantis will continue to operate, as you mentioned, as a standalone company within IREN. Talk a bit about this relationship there.
Yeah, look, I mean, I won't comment on behalf of IREN. I mean, there is, regulatory things that we have to go through, but from our perspective, we are, driving forward as we were. We will, continue to deliver, as we have before. We don't see any sort of, major changes of what has gone before or even our approach. What we have now is a partnership and a capability that wasn't there before, that enables us to move faster and accelerate.
Dominic, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us such a clear picture of what this acquisition means under the hood, not just for Mirantis, but for every platform engineer who's trying to make AI infrastructure actually work in production. This looks more or less like taking a step forward, making things easier for the whole ecosystem, offering more through this collaboration or acquisition. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to chat with you folks again. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Swapnil. It's good to see you again.